Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy University. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm really excited today to talk about mindfulness and particularly exercise and mindfulness, something that I learned I needed in my life to really move myself forward, to let those positive endorphins go into my mind and brain. And so as I was doing further research, I discovered a wonderful gentleman out of England. So we get to talk to across the pond today, as I like to say, William Pullen. So he's a London-based psychotherapist, author, and app developer. And he's also the co-author of Run for Your Life, Mindful Running for a Happy Life, and also the founder of Dynamic Running Therapy. So welcome to the show, William.
Thank you very much, Alan.
I'm so excited to talk about this because really I was the guy that hated the gym, hated exercise.
Right.
I did theater, so I was moving around as a kid and all that, but I never, did sports. I never really learned to exercise properly or got sort of that feeling. And then, lo and behold, in my life, I hit a point where, all of a sudden I was at a desk all day and I'd come home and sit and play on the computer all day. And I started not feeling so good about myself. So I went through my own therapy, as you're a therapist. I went through my own, and they said, you got to go to the gym. You got to get exercise. You got to go out. You got to go breathe fresh air. You got to go do these things. And of course, that's just one part of what they told me I had to do, which was wholly life-changing. But I think it's so important that we talk about that and that you're the work you're doing there.
Well, the beginning of my work of the foundation of dynamic running therapy that led onto the book and everything that I do, it also comes out of a struggle like yours and like so many therapists. And in my dark year that I had, I decided I needed a sort of military approach to getting out of the situation I found myself in my head. And exercise was the very first thing I went to. And it wasn't that I had a lifetime of doing exercise. I just knew instinctively that getting out and getting moving would help to loosen up the kind of very rigid, repetitive thinking that was going on in my head. That's why I always use that quote, which I wish I could say was mine, but it's not. Movement is medicine. We all know it is, right? We all remember that from our childhoods. So, you and I share that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, a lot of us who go into, I think one of the things that people don't talk about, and I don't know, we'll see how far we get with it, but the people who believe in therapy of any type, whether it's, the people at the gym helping you or a coach like me or a therapist like you or a psychiatrist, I think all believe that and have all been through situations where we believe in what we're selling, right? We go into this because we care about helping others the way that we helped ourselves. So I guess off that note, how did you decide to get started as a therapist? Where did that come from?
Well, so part of this military campaign, there were about 4 things I took on. The first was trying to run. And I started off very slowly, 100 meters at a time. And the second was going into therapy. I found myself a good therapist. I had a friend whose husband was a therapist, and I went to see him. He would sit there in his black suit, and he was very much into what they call psych education, or some people call it psych education, where you actually tell your clients the sort of theory and basis of the work. You share that process with them. And I really enjoyed that because it gave me something I could work on, expand on, and something to almost to believe in. something to concentrate on, something to sink my teeth into. And months later, I thought to myself, and I'd always been fascinated by psychology. I'd done it at university. And I thought to myself, I really just want to study this. And I hope one day to write a book. I wasn't sure I knew that I'd have to be a therapist at some point, if you train to be a therapist. But it wasn't that drew me so much. It was, I want to write a book. I really think I've spent my life thinking about what makes people tick. And I want to find something that I think can make people tick. And then I want to write a book about it. And I want to add my book onto all those wise books that are out there and contribute something, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think your book, Run for Your Life, I haven't read it yet. But I look forward to actually getting it and reading it, because comes out of that idea. And one of the things you were saying that intrigues me is, I know that when I went to my therapist, I was a self-learner as well. So I was constantly reading books and reading the internet and following sort of the path of how to get healthier and all that. I was fascinated with the whole thing. And by the time it sort of ended for me, I knew I was done with therapy. Was the time I went in to tell him about a recent study I had just read about. And I said, "Did you read this really cool study?" And he's like, "No." And I thought, well, I'm now schooling the therapist, which I was like, well, I guess I can take the rest on myself right now, and we'll see. We left it at, we'll see if we need to get together again. But I tell a lot of people that this podcast that I do, and we were talking a little before the show how much we enjoy it. It is a kind of therapy for me. I find it to be therapeutic for myself to have these conversations with people who, like yourself, who are involved in helping people be healthy, live healthier, happier, stronger lives through what we understand are techniques. And so I know your technique deals with dynamic running therapy, and so I know your book probably is a big piece of that. So that's really what you ended up landing on. Where did that come out of?
So, when you asked me about how I became a therapist, and I was telling you that I'd started running. Well, I started running with a friend, an American actually, called Chris, and he didn't know it at the time, but he was about to end up divorced, and he was obviously an unhappy man, and I was an unhappy man, and these two unhappy men went running together. And it gave us something to do. It gave us a sense of empowerment, I suppose. I was feeling like, oh God, I don't know what to do with myself and what to do with this situation. And then suddenly I had something to do. I could challenge myself to go an extra 50 or 100 meters every day further than I had the day before. And the strange thing was, as we ran together, we found ourselves talking a lot. And what I noticed was that somehow the run helped to facilitate conversation, and not just any old conversation, but intimate conversation, the same kind that you might find on a road trip. I'm sure your listeners will know that sensation of going for a long country walk or a road trip, and you find yourself sometimes a completely stranger just opening up. Yeah. And it's something to do with being on a journey with somebody. And I think part of it's being side by side. I think it's instead of facing off, which is a big part of why I think dynamic running therapy works well, because the therapist moves with the client. Or if you read the book, you'll be moving by yourself or with a friend. You can do it with a friend. But that sense of moving is an enactment of your investment, your decision to address, to change, to grow. It's so very different from being in a room repeating thoughts which perhaps you've already been repeating in your head, which can, obviously it's not right for some people prefer a room, some people prefer being outside. But it can be, re-traumatizing or pointless or difficult. Or I get excited by taking people who are quite stuck and getting them out and getting them moving and getting some focus on it. The book is full of a bunch of questions. So you turn to whichever chapter it is that addresses whatever condition you have, or conditions are anxiety, depression. And it takes you on an entire journey, talking to you about your relationship with yourself, running with specific questions which help you investigate where your depression is on, what your relationship was like with your parents, what your relationship was like with yourself. And I don't know, I just think that people respond to journeys. They respond to a sort of 3-act structure. They like the idea, just as we do in our myths and the movies we go to see. They respond to the idea of, the call to adventure, the challenge, and then a reversal or two, and then finally, hopefully, taking the golden fleece home, winning that prized piece of wisdom.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a neat way to think about it. And I talk about, a lot of the times, like for me, I was kind of stuck thinking of life as a journey, right? Your beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And I'm somewhere in the middle right now, right? Theoretically. And then to get healthier, I started saying, no, life is really a lot of journeys. And what's exciting is every one of them has a beginning, middle, and end. And it can be bad and it can be good, but it ends, right? And then you move on. And for me, that was really big. But the other thing that was big, when I got into exercise and particularly sort of like you, I needed a goal. And I said, my goal is to run a 5K. Right. And, that's such a short run to most runners, but I had never done it. So, it motivated me to go to the gym, and it motivated me to work on, that. But the one thing I said to myself, and the one thing I was very careful about, and I think this is where I think mindfulness comes into play, and I wonder, just talking to you, how you feel, is the goal was to run it. The goal was not to run it in 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. You see, to me, the difference is I disappoint myself if I said I need to run it in 20 minutes. But I can be happy if I just ran it. And I just wonder what's your thoughts around in terms of, that idea. And plus, what I really like is this idea of having someone you do this with, that you're not on a journey alone, and that I think you're right. It facilitates something that we're woefully bad at these days, which is opening up conversation. So,
in the book I mentioned, there's a chapter in there about empathy runs, which is a program I run for kids, and parents can do it with their kids, which is teaching people that very thing, how to listen, and indeed how to talk, because they both take skill. Mm-hmm. But listening in particular, as is often said, we spend most of our time when we're in conversations preparing our reply rather than really listening to what the person has to say. So, no, I agree completely. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to run with another person, walk, run, whatever you're doing, and share your story with them. To have it witnessed, to feel the camaraderie. I mean, often people have never talked some of this stuff to anybody before, and yet in this moment when they're running, it seems okay. And for some reason, I don't know what it is. It's the movement, it's the hormones involved. Who knows? But people open up, and it frees them up. And it's, it's what we should all be doing, right? Walking, sharing stories with each other, all talking is therapeutic. It's all natural. It's good.
Right. And also that idea that, when you commit to doing it with someone else, this is old logic about exercise, right? But when you commit to doing it with someone else, like my first run, I was in high anxiety. I didn't want to go anywhere. And so, of course, as the run comes around, and I've talked to so many people since then, I'm nothing special, right? This is all of us. When you have anxiety and you're having trouble leaving the house, as you're anxious about doing anything, when you have someone you're committed to doing it with, and in this case, I had my son and a friend, it kind of forces it. It's like you can't say no. You can't say, you've committed to it. And there's a wonderful power, because once you're there, all that anxiety you had, all that, what I call the past, you're worrying about the future, which is, not, of course, part of our mindfulness talk that we'll probably get into in the second half, goes away. You're now there, and you're going to do it. And it's like having that person there kind of feels protective. It kind of feels good. Like, okay, now I'm not alone. I'm with someone, and I'm protected. And I think probably for a lot of people at the beginning in particular, it's a very powerful thing to have a partner, to have someone you trust, to have to build, to know that you're there. And I'm guessing that's why that conversation opens up, because that person becomes somewhat of that trusted person to be there for you.
Yes, I think so. And I think that the fact, they're going to share with you too. So, you're in an equal relationship. You can see them showing up. They've had to do a lot more than just show up for a coffee and gossip. They've actually had to change, and they're going to go through the same physical challenge you are. So they're committed, and that makes you feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I remember when I did the Paris Marathon. It's the only marathon I've ever done,
Mm-hmm.
and my God, it might be the greatest moment of my life, the greatest moment of joy in my life, I think, was the starting line there, because I trained so hard. In fact, my knees gave out. When you train for a marathon, you typically spend about 3 to 6 months getting ready for it, and about a month before you run it, as I recall, you stop to give yourself a rest, and you get up to about, the most you ever do is something like a 20 or 21 mile run or something.
Right.
In because you don't want to do the big one before the big one.
Mm-hmm.
But my knees started to give out at 12, 14 miles. And so I had to stop at sort of 2 months beforehand. And I just, a bit like you, I said to myself, I'm going to do this run. I don't care the time. The only thing that matters is I get it done. If I have to do it on my knees, I will do it on my knees, but I'm going to get this done. And I'm going to enjoy it, because I don't want to make this about, I know I can do this. I know in some shape or form I can do this. Well, when I showed up on that starting line, and there were 50,000 people there with me, and they played. Can you guess what piece of music they played?
Well, let's see. If you were in Paris,
no, that won't be the clue. It was an American.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so
think sports.
Oh, So like the Olympic? No, that wouldn't be American. I don't know. What was it? What was it?
It was Eye of the Tiger, Rocky.
Oh, Rocky. Yeah.
Rocky. I forget who actually plays that, but my God.
Survivor is the name of the group.
Survivor.
I could tell you how I know that, because my memory is emotion based, and so I remember time based on my emotion and where I was. But yeah, it was Survivor, Eye of the Tiger. Yep.
It's a powerful song, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, definitely very powerful.
And I felt hysterical with joy. I mean, even now recalling it, I feel my throat tightening up. I could have cried with joy on that.
I'm getting goosebumps, because I'm thinking about my biggest accomplishment was a half marathon, and I ran it at my alma mater, Virginia Tech, which, as you know, had a shooting that's now about 10 years ago. But I was with a friend from high school who now lived down there, and her brother, who I hadn't seen my friend from high school in 10 years, and her brother in 20. And we got together, and we spent this evening together before it. And of course, we loaded ourselves with carbs. And then we got up the next morning, and we're standing there. And of course, I'm nervous as all get out. It was another one of those, I don't think I'm going to go. And then you go. And I remember that same thing. I remember two things: standing on the starting line with all of these people, probably, 4,000 people. And then just when the gun went off, the chill, and I sometimes get it with music, going to a concert that I really want to see this musical act. I'm a big Coldplay fan, and I remember going to see them, and I'll just tear up the minute that they start playing. Just I think it's that sort of excitement that you get, that all this pent up energy you've put into being there and seeing this and then doing it, and then at the end, my only goal I ever say at the end is I want to sprint. I want to sprint the finish line. I see the finish line, and I don't want to wheeze into it, and I did, and I ran it at the end when I had nothing left, and I did it, and that was it. Again, 3 hours and something, but it didn't matter. And I don't know if you've seen the thing recently where the child with cerebral palsy crosses a finish line at midnight. He ran a marathon that took him, I guess 12 hours. And he crossed the finish line and he fell right before it, and all these people went up to get him, and he pushed him away, and he did it himself. And I just can't even imagine. I just think about things like that and how much confidence and self-esteem is rebuilt in these moments. So we got to take a little break, but when we come back, I kind of want to get into that idea of, that mindfulness that we're building, and that how we work ourselves out of those areas that you use this for in your practice. So just stay with me for a sec. We'll be right back with more Healthy University.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg. A girl who self-harms due to the relentless bullying in her life. A girl who is planning a new way to torture her victim through extreme bullying. A boy who must atone for his past while working to avoid what he did in the halls of his school by the kids who want to see him pay. A youth who wants to be called anarchy, busy making plans to destroy the lives of all those that mistreated him in his life. How do these four lives come together due to the bullying abuse in their community? And what will happen when they do? Find out in Alan Eisenberg's new book, Crossing the Line, coming soon.
Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. We're having a great conversation here with William Pullen, who is the author of Run for Your Life, Mindful Running for a Happy Life, and also the founder of Dynamic Running Therapy, as well as a therapist. So, William, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Alan.
So I think when we left, we were talking about these really great highs that we had that you and I had both built ourselves up to. But I know that, it's not that easy. As I would tell people, it was 4 years. It was not in 1 year I got here. It took a couple of years of getting past all of the anxieties and depressions and other things that were going on in my life. So how do you start, I guess? How do you start your mindful running, walking aspect of what you do with people in your therapy?
Well, so the book and the app both have standalone mindful walking and mindful running in them. When you ask me how does it work in my practice, dynamic running therapy, then mindfulness plays an element, and it's integrated into the whole practice. And it works like this. I have something called the grounding process, and I make it out to be voluntary. For the readers and users of the app, or the people that I'm working with. So it's their choice. But if they want to do it, I think it's a great way to begin a run. So you sit down and you do a body scan from the top of your head down to the bottom, running through it, becoming mindful of what you feel. To those members of your audience who know mindfulness, they'll be familiar with body scans.
Yeah, so you're really
And
talking like a meditation. You're starting with a meditation of some, right?
exactly. But it might be a guided one if I'm doing it
Right.
with a client. And then we'll do an environmental scan. So I'll ask them what they can see and hear and smell. And what I'm really trying to get people to do is become very present to where they are in this moment, so that they can approach what we're doing with a sort of fresh mind, or what I know in the East they like to call the beginner's mind. So it's not. So I'm trying to free it of a lot of expectation, fear, judgment, etc. Just to become present to the moment and get ready to go. The final step of it is what I call the priming question, and that's a question where I ask you, do you know what you want to get out of this session before we start moving? And if they have a focus, great. Then we discuss it for a moment, and then we start moving with it. My sessions are completely client-led. I believe that's critical to dynamic running therapy. So if they want to sit there, we sit. They want to run, we run. They want to walk, we walk. And that gives me a chance to notice how what they're talking about how they're moving is affected by what they're talking about. Their posture, are they leaning forward now? Are they slowed down? Have they speeded up? I'm watching all of this, trying to make sense of it and reflecting it back to them at times. I notice that you speed up when you talk about your father. I notice that when you talk about your job that you hate, I notice that often your breathing gets heavy. And so I'll reflect it back, and sometimes it comes as a real surprise to them. Which also gives them a chance to then change their movements. So they may continue talking about it, but now speed up. And that has a way of sort of resetting the brain.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about all of that, and I think I like to just say, I never know who's listening, but the idea of mindfulness that we're talking about, and what it means is really to be, as William said, present. Anxiety usually comes from thinking too much about the future. Anger and depression usually comes from your past, right? And what we're trying to do is just get you present. And in the present there is nothing going on except what you're doing at that moment. And I think that's the real key. Is it's not easy. I mean, people think, I can just, be in the moment. Well, no, our minds are constantly ruminating, running, and certainly the minds of probably the people you're working with are in that zone of, it's going to be work. It's not just going to magically happen. And so I love that you're doing these techniques to notice. What I always think is good is to trigger people to notice when they're doing things.
Yes.
I do some experiments when I talk about bullying abuse and how I can have them recall things if they've been traumatized and it happened 30 years ago. I can have them quickly recall something, and I show them, hey, it hasn't disappeared, it hasn't gone away, it's right there in front of you. It's right there in the back of your head, and all I had to do was trigger this, and that's that's what you have to give up, is this thing that you're letting trigger you. So as I know, we were talking a little bit about wanting to hit on these issues. How do you start with someone who, I imagine a lot of the people you start with are in these throes of we're trying to recover from bullying, abuse, or abuse as a whole, with anxiety, depression, low self-esteem? How does your therapy practice work with that?
Well, I think it just the same as anybody's does. I'm primarily a person-centered psychotherapist, so I'm interested in the relationship between me and my client, and I try to model a good relationship with them so that they can find acceptance with me and acceptance of their stories, understanding of their stories, stuff that they haven't been able to offer to themselves or nobody else has offered to them. But in the moment that I can do it, the idea is that they can then take that and interject it, take it in for themselves, and find an acceptance for themselves. That's what my book is. And it's interesting, you go back to the importance of noticing. I think the two big things in my book, the messages I try to get to people over and over again, is one is learning to notice. Learn to notice the quality of your inner dialogue. What are you repeating? Why are you repeating it? Not so much why, but just what. Notice, because it's not normal. When we have these bad habits, we start to just do them, for a decade or two at a time, thinking dreadful thoughts about ourselves. And I always call them records. And we put these records on, and we play them from beginning to end, the same old record over and over and over again. And the record has no ending. It's really a continuous loop, and nothing good comes out of it. And we put it on anyway. And so what I try to do is I try to say to people, look, you've got to learn to notice when that record comes on. That's the first thing, is noticing. And then the second thing is deciding what you want to do about that record.
Right.
I guess I don't know if that was a good answer to your question.
No, I think it is, and one of the things that I think that's what we do is when we're in the throes of sort of these low points, the record. I mean, for us older folks who remember LPs, they get a scratch and they just keep playing that same thing over and over and over again, and that's the way it felt, and it'll drive anyone crazy. That's the joke, but.
Well, we were talking about PTSD before.
Right.
And that's very much like a scratch on a record, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that the damage is real. I mean, the first thing I had to admit to myself is that the damage is real. It's not something I'm going to bury in my past. It's not something I don't have to come face to face with. It's there, and at some point it just. You have to allow it to, for me, I had to allow it to just become part of my story. I didn't have to allow it to become my story. And that was the problem, that kind of dichotomy. But the other thing I find interesting is I really became a believer, I don't want to say a health nut. I think being healthy is in favor of everybody, when it comes to sleep, exercise, and nutrition. I think if you get all those three things aligned, you're going to start feeling better. I just personally think that they're so important. And I think the exercise side, everything that I've studied, it talks about endorphins. And so what have you learned about what also comes out? Because I think as you take these walks or as you take these runs with people who haven't been doing these activities, and I wear a Fitbit every day. I track that I make sure I'm active because I know it makes me feel better. How what is the science behind the endorphins and the positiveness about movement, that you're also inclusive? I assume that's the big part that you really discovered in your practice was, hey, I feel better after this. I know when I go to the gym, there's two signs. There's a sign walking in that says, no, that half the battle was just showing up. And then as I walk out, it says, no, you'll be back tomorrow. And I always think to myself, dang, those guys are smart. So the marketers over at Gold's Gym where I go really figured it out, because I don't want to be there when I'm walking in the door, but when I'm coming out, I feel good. And
that's right. It's extraordinary what a shift it is.
Yeah. And so I became a true believer that there is a true chemical release in addition to learning all the therapeutic releases, all the therapy needed. And is that really what you've kind of discovered? Do you find that's...
in the book I put in some of the research that I came across. I'm an avid reader of New Scientist, and I did a master's on a lot of this sort of stuff. And there's lots of stuff out there about the chemical changes. Indeed, there's also something the Japanese do called forest bathing, where they've got something like 65 forests in Japan which are dedicated to forest bathing, where people go in order to recover from the sterility and stress of the city. Because the Japanese believe that the forest can offer you, they can reinvigorate you. And science is now showing that all the plants, the trees and the plants around you, they throw off this misty oil that you run through, which is being thrown off by the plants to keep insects away and pestilence. But in fact, we're so closely linked biologically for so many years that actually they've now come to recognize that those molecules, those particular molecules, can actually cure depression. Now, I don't want to, I make that sound a little bit supernatural, and nothing cures depression that easily, and maybe one shouldn't even use the word cure, but it certainly has impact. It's shown to have an impact. And as for the other parts about why is it that you start a run, you're in a filthy mood on a Monday morning, stressed, thinking, God, I don't know what to do with this. I can't stand this. This is too much. There's no way I can do. And by the end of it, you're suddenly feeling positive, and you've got an idea of what to do now. So I very much talk about that, about how I think running can be a true problem-solving and creative act. I think it's a phenomenal method that's being missed out by boardrooms and God knows who else. We should be sending out the great minds of the day for runs in order to crack, the mysteries of the world.
Yeah, I definitely find, that a good shower, sometimes I'm in the shower and all of a sudden I light up, just because the shower for me is refreshing, right? It's like a little time to yourself, and that's when things trigger, right? And I think certainly walking and the idea of mindful walking or mindful running, at least part of what I've learned is, that you're paying attention. So it's interesting you talk about the plants and all of that. It's funny how we don't notice things. And my little story about that is that there are actually lizards in Virginia. Now, I've lived in Virginia for 30-something years, and my wife, it was probably when I was living here about 20-something years, my wife grew up on a farm, and she and I had this argument one night, like, oh, there's no lizards in Virginia. And she's like, yes, there are. They're these, beautiful purple with a yellow stripe down their back things. And the next day we go to a park, and don't you know it, on the fence, there's a lizard. And it just goes to show that when you're not paying attention, when nobody tells you, and you're not noticing the things around you and how beautiful these things are and how they take your mind away from maybe that trouble for a moment, how you get to see that beauty, and that actually helped me, So when when I think of mindful walks or mindful exercise, I think of intentional. I'm intentionally paying attention, particularly if it's outdoors, to the sounds, the smells, the things I've never noticed. And I've had some amazing experiences seeing, deer and animals that you just were there, snakes, which you don't always want to see, but they're there. And my son's really good at it. He picks up on them, like, just, I don't know how his eyes work, but he's like, look, a snake, and I'll have to look for 10 minutes and then see it. But that idea of, that stops that little skip in your head, right? Now you're focused on something else, which is, what are these beautiful things around me, or what are these mysterious things that I could find to be beautiful? So I find, that mindfulness activity outdoors particularly is very therapeutic, and just having that experience. So for me, I know we touched a little bit on bullying and abuse. In your how things have gone with you in terms of maybe your practice or things you've noticed. I know that, America, Britain, Australia, a lot of bullying stories come out of there. And there's, certainly Britain has her fair share of school bullying issues that Pink Floyd was very nice to tell us about.
Yeah.
But what do you experience in that world where you are? Because I'm not there, obviously.
Well, I find myself treating people who were bullied a lot when they were younger. I read a lot of terrible stories about very young people committing suicide, and it's just, I think there's nothing sadder. It's just tragic beyond words. And I work with something called boarding school syndrome, which is something you get a lot of in kids that were sent off to boarding school at a very early age, sometimes 7, 8, 9, and they learn. There's a lot of bullying goes on, and you're miles away from home, and you have to learn to be tough. And any sign of weakness is absolutely outlawed and only welcomes further bullying. So you become tough, and you learn how to dissociate, and you learn how to create a sort of survivor mentality. And in time, you most likely learn how to bully others, and it runs like a cycle through a school. I mean, some of these schools, interestingly, even have special sort of bullying language, which it's an entire words and languages, which were words rather, sorry, not languages, entire words which only exist inside the school itself, and it's passed down through generation through generation. Sure. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it there, and it's quite often I meet women who are married to these men in particular, and I know women are bullied just as much, if not more, or in the same way or differently. But I'm going to talk about the men for a moment. These men, I meet their wives socially. I don't mean my clients' wives. I just mean when I'm out, and I know the type. I know the type of guy that's been to boarding school. I can tell him often from the other side of a room, and often then they make great CEOs and they make great leaders because they are tough people, and they've learned how to be little soldiers. And now they're big soldiers, and they soldier on and they soldier on. But unfortunately, they don't make great husbands, and they don't make great fathers. And often I find myself talking to women who say, God, I wish I could persuade my husband to come and see you. He won't talk, and he started drinking, or he gambles, or whatever he does. Anything to sort of try and find an outlet. There's a lot of drug use as well. So, yeah, there's plenty of it here. There's plenty of it here.
And I think, bullying's become a wide open subject, of course, just like you. I mean, I'm looking at the internet every day, and you're seeing children 8 to 11 who commit suicide and now have outlets with the internet to write notes that say they're doing it because of bullying, and their self-esteem is shot at 8 and 11 years old. You just sit there and you wonder, how can that be happening? But one of the new philosophies I think that's starting to be absorbed, because I've always said that bullying is a really gray area. If the statistics say 85% of people have been bullied, then it can't just be 15% of people are bullies. So the new terminology that we're using in my world is hurt people.
Yeah.
And so, if you were taught that this hurt, and if you've, what we call, I don't know if you call it the authentic self, if you start to lose your authentic self and decide you're going to put on this, this suit of armor pretty much to protect yourself, that makes you strong, right? That I have a suit of armor on, and I'm going to put a weapon in my hand, and I'm going to use it. And that's what I feel like is the next great thing to break, is to understand that it isn't black and white. There isn't just a bullying victim and a bully. there's a perpetration of it. And then I think in a lot of marriages, and I've always been willing to say, even in my own, when I come home, I can be a bear. I put on my little happy face at work because I don't want to displease any of my bosses, and I want to keep my job. But I can be myself at home, and it's not always a good thing. It's not always a happy day. And I think that's I say I'm always working on it. It's partly become habitual from my backstory, and it's something that I think you work on. You work. I want to be a good person, so I will work to be a good person. But that doesn't mean that tomorrow I will be the best person ever. We're running out of time, and I have one more question to ask you, and then I want to let you go ahead and tell everybody how they can get your app and your book and hear from you. But I always ask my guests this one question because I find it to be intriguing when we start thinking about hindsight, because I think as adults we do see ourselves a little differently and we start to learn. So if you could go back in time and tell your younger self one thing, when and what would that be?
Oh God, that's such a good question. I think I know the answer to that. I would tell myself just to give things a go. Don't think about them so much. Don't worry about them so much. Don't plan them so much. Just start things and do them and see what happens. I think that far too much of my life has been spent, worrying about things and trying to organize things to be just right the right way. And you get to a certain age, and you'll know this. We all know this. Mm-hmm. You learn this when you're about 30, 35. You learn that all that planning and worrying that you did when you were younger was a complete waste of time, because what you learn at 35 is that you're on the clock, and it's best just to get something going, one. And two, don't worry about it, and don't start planning, don't start worrying about what's going to happen 3 steps down the road, because one thing's for damn sure, that is it won't be the third step, it won't be how you think it is. Or you'll do all this planning for the 4th, 5th, and 6th, but the third step's going to be different. It always is. So you've got to remain flexible, and you just got to get going. That's what I would myself.
And I think that's the unfortunate thing in our lives, is that at the times we probably should learn these things earlier. It's just the way life is. We hit this point and we go, you know what? I don't care. I've got enough friends. If you don't want to be my friend, I don't care. And if you don't like me, I don't care. And I was lucky enough. I'm lucky enough to still have my mom and dad around. And my mom's always been like a Pollyanna, what we call a Pollyanna, a very positive person. They both had very rough childhoods. And so I asked her when I was writing my first book, why, how do you do this? How do you live this way? How do you, with all this that's happened to you? And she goes, I developed diligus. And I said, diligus? What's that? When someone asks me something, I say, do I look like I give a shit? I said, oh, I get it. Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I'm getting to.
Diligus, I love it.
So, she looked at me and said that. It's very shocking to have your mother, tell you this, and that's, that's like, whoa, okay. And she's told me some other wonderful, wise things. That's, but I think that we learned that too late almost. Like it's like, yeah, really, is there anything at work that can't wait till tomorrow? I mean, when you're dealing, what's more important, getting home to your kid's wife or family or boyfriend or girlfriend or dog, anything that, you love and that loves you back, or, finishing up that paper you're trying to write, you've got to be able to prioritize the things that are important in your life and give them the priority that they deserve to, I think, make yourself happier even, and live a more fruitful life. And it sounds like you've been able to help a lot of people through your work. So we touched on your app, but how can people learn more about your app, your book, your therapy?
Okay, so the app's in the App Store. It's called Dynamic Running Therapy. It's free. Download it, give it a go. You'll hear me taking you on a little journey, which I hope you'll enjoy as you walk or run. It's got meditation on there. It's got these specific programs for depression and anxiety, as well as mindful walking and mindful running. The book has even more than that in it. The book is called Run for Your Life by me, William Pullen. That's Pullen. And you can find that on amazon.co.uk. At the moment, you can pre-order it on amazon.com. It comes out in the States in the fall. If you want to get it now, then you'll have to buy it off the English site. That's the bad news. The good news is that the dollar's never been stronger, and so it's not going to cost you very much money. At least the book won't. The shipping probably costs you more than the book does. But I think that it'll be pretty cheap. I don't know how much, but it's like it won't be much. What else? I'm on Twitter at Pullen Therapy. I welcome anybody to email me there. I've got a website, Dynamic Running Therapy. You can email me there too. I thoroughly enjoyed this, Alan. Really, pleasure.
I did too, and all the links you just mentioned, I'll definitely have with the podcast on my website, PullenRecovery.org, so people can get right to you, right from my website, get right to your book, all of that, because you're doing fabulous stuff. I love that you're integrating therapy and exercise and mindfulness. To me, this is what I speak about all the time. So I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for staying up a little late on your end and being patient with me. And I hope we get to talk again. If we ever get a chance. I love talking to you. So Thank you, William Pullen. So again, it's William Pullen. And I'll have all his links to his great app. In fact, now you've got me thinking about the app, and I'm like, I think I'm going to go get it because it sounds like something I could use. So I look forward to that, and I'll definitely touch base with you again as you progress. So thank you very much for being on Healthy University.
Thank you, Alan.
And this is Alan Eisenberg, your host, and please join us next time.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.